Hi there, thanks for joining us. This is the Arts and Education Grant Info Session for the FY27 Creative Start Project Grant. This is our recorded info session. My name is Alexis Sarah. I am an Arts and Education Project Manager here at the Washington State Arts Commission, also known as ArtsWA. So, some high-level information about the Creative Start Project Grant. This grant is focused on early learners, and when we say early learners, we're talking about preschool through grade 3. Projects do not have to be working with all of those grade bands, but your project does need to focus on working with that age group, those educators, or those families. Projects need to focus on arts integrated teaching and learning. And in that little box there, you see it says it's arts plus your core curriculum or some other non-arts curriculum, and that you are looking for and measuring learning in both areas. So there's arts learning and then there is non-arts learning in your project, and you're looking for that. Projects need to focus on the creative, academic, and social emotional development of the early learning students that you're reaching. The project period for your grant would be from July 1 of this year through June 30th of next year. So essentially summer plus the school year. And the award amounts for this grant will be in two sizes. So you can ask for a smaller award of $6,000, or you can go for a larger award of $10,000. Only whole amounts will be awarded. So there won't be any partial awards. Okie doke. So now I'm going to talk about who is eligible to apply. Um, so in this table that you see, organization types are listed. These are all eligible to apply for the Creative Start Project Grant. So Head Start or ECAP programs, public schools or school districts, educational service districts, tribal, state, or municipal government agencies, and that would include tribal compact schools in any of these or tribal schools, and 501c3 nonprofit organizations. And we do want to uh, ensure that you understand that if your organization has a current 2-year AIE sustaining grant, you are not eligible to apply for the upcoming Creative Start Project grant. This is just due to some really limited funding that we're looking at, and we just want to ensure that our grants are reaching a diverse um, number of organizations across the state of Washington. Um, and just to before I talk about eligibility, you can apply for other grants from ArtsWA in other programs as long as it is you're not looking to fund the same projects or the same expenses. So project eligibility, this um, projects need to be designed for, again, those early learners, pre-K to grade 3 students, their families, their educators. It needs to be arts integrated focus. It needs to be 100% free of charge for all participating students and families. There needs to be sequential teaching and learning. So this cannot fund one-time experiences. The project really we want to fund projects that are building off of the learning. It doesn't have to be super long, but it can't just be a one-time assembly or one-time field trip that isn't connected to um, sequential learning goals. And the projects cannot replace or fund in-school instruction that's already part of basic education. And what that means is that we can't fund like general operating support for basic education in public schools. And projects also your request can only cover 25% of your request can cover materials. So we can't have projects that are asking just for materials or equipment. And this slide, we've outlined the scoring criteria, and it has four main components. The first criteria point, the first criteria, which is worth 30 points, is arts integrated learning. There are three things that is looking at. That's looking at integrated goals, an arts goal, and a non-arts learning goal. It's looking at student experience, and it's looking for the evidence of learning. Under the second one here, project design, also worth 30 points. That's looking at your project plan, your staffing and partnerships, and any feedback, adaptation, and celebration that you have connected to your project. Number three is opportunity and access. That's worth 20 points, and that is connected to community responsiveness and need, and your access and outcomes for your project. And the fourth criteria is educator and artist support. That's also worth 20 points. And that's looking at your collaboration and planning of your between artists and educators, and any professional learning or professional support that you're going to offer the educators and artists connected to your project. And everything we're mentioning is all available in our guidelines. It's on our website. Everything is, all the language is the same. Um, and so you can find all of this information on arts.wa.gov/creative-start. So due to the funding limitations that we are looking at for the next fiscal year, ArtsWA is applying some priorities just to ensure that our funds are reaching organizations and a variety of organizations and geographic locations. So the way we're doing this is through two different funding priorities. All eligible organizations and projects are encouraged to apply and will be scored by a panel using the criteria that I just mentioned on the slide before. But if but up to 20 additional points will be allotted to applications that meet the following funding criteria. So if the majority of your project serves early learning students and or educators and families that are located in counties that are identified as by the Employment Security Department as a distressed area in 2024, they'll be eligible for 10 points. And just to note, the distressed areas list is determined by the state each year, and and it looks at unemployment and unemployment average over a number of years. Um, and so for the purpose of for this grant cycle, the eligibility is going to be based on the county designations in effect at the time of application, and that'll be worth 20 points. The second funding priority is connected to low-income households. So if your project, the majority of your project is going to serve Title I schools, Head Start, ECAP, or if your art or community organization is serving individuals with at least 40% of low income, uh, you would be eligible for that. To prove this second bullet, you'll be asked to upload a proof of that information for the communities that the project is reaching. So a little bit about how we review and make funding decisions. So our application review process is as follows. Our staff screen applications that come in for eligibility and completeness. We then pass the applications on to a panel, and the panel scores your application using the scoring criteria. The panel that we use are uh, uh, members of the community, members of the public. Our We often will use our commissioners who are our ArtsWA board and sometimes ArtsWA staff. And we select our panelists based on with a balance of expertise and diverse geographic and cultural communities. We take those panel scores and then we will apply funding priorities if applications are eligible for that. And then we look at our available funds, and that's how we determine who receives funding. And just to put our process in a policy context, the the use of panels is aligned with the Washington State Administrative Code. The exact code is the WAC 30-12-030. And so we are following the policy that was laid out that the Washington State Arts Commission adheres to. And just to keep it in mind that this is a competitive grant, our funding is limited, so not all eligible applications are awarded. And so this is also just like a high-level view of what are the components of the application. So when you begin an application, the first thing you will do is there'll be an organization search. You can search by organization name, but we encourage folks to search your organization using your EIN or your UEI number. Once you establish your organization in our online grant platform, you will be brought to an eligibility quiz. This quiz will help determine if your organization or your project is eligible. And Kalei, my colleague, will talk about some of the nuances in the eligibility quiz on the next slide. Next, after eligibility quiz, we'll bring you to the initial form, the full application. Within that, you will provide your organization or applicant information. If you are a 501c3 nonprofit, you will have to upload your letter of determination from the IRS. You'll complete a conflict of interest statement. This just helps identify if you have a connection to the Washington State Arts Commission or our staff. There is an ADA or Americans with Disabilities compliance verification. And then we have a project information section. This includes title, your project locations. The project locations help us identify if your project is taking place in those distressed areas. You will provide some information about the communities that the project's going to serve, and that's where the budget table is now going to live. And Kalei, my colleague, will show you our more simplified budget table. And then after project information, you'll actually get to the criteria questions. Those are the parts that the panel is going to be looking at um, to score. So within the criteria questions, there's a mix, and Clay will show you this. There's a mix of both multiple choice questions and narrative questions. And there is one upload that you'll have to do in that section, which is a project sample. And now I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Kalei Matsui.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kalei Matsui, and I am the AIE program coordinator, and I am here to walk you through the mechanics of the application and the interesting and the structure of it. So here on the landing page, we have our links on our website, how to navigate to the application, which is on the online platform called Submittable. So here we're at the Creative Start Project Grant FY27 application. And if we scroll down past our logo, there's a link here where you can find our online posting of the guidelines if you'd like to have that side by side as you're working. And there's instructions here about how to access the application, but there is a funny feature that Submittable has where the only way to begin the process is by clicking this submit button. which is counterintuitive. You are not submitting a blank application. So don't be worried of that. It is simply just their way to access. So once you click submit, it will ask you to log in with your submittable account or to create one. Do remember that the email address that you use to log in and to start this application will have to be used to submit the application at the very end. So making sure that you're in the correct account. Also, if you collaborate with other members of your team, that they cannot submit on your behalf. It has to be the person who initially logged in to begin this application. So just being aware of that. Once you do log in, it'll show you the top of the application again, and you'll have to scroll down and find your organization. And this is what Alexis was talking about for your organization identifier. It is most accurate if you just type in your EIN or your UEI number, but you can type in your name, at which point you'll be able to find yourself here by either your EIN or your UEI. And you would just select and continue. Once you do select and continue, it'll show you the eligibility form here. And again, it links you to the guidelines as well. And you'll answer this as accurately as possible to your organization and your project that you are proposing in this application. So of course, being in Washington State, making sure that you are not an ineligible type of organization applicant. And again, reiterating that you cannot, unfortunately, be a recipient of our 2-year arts and education grant called the Sustaining Project Grant. Essentially, for next school year, we are only allowing organizations to have one type of arts and education grant, but just making sure that you can still apply for other programs within ArtsWA. Okay? Making sure that you're serving the correct age group eligible for this application, and that you're focusing on arts integration. A question about that I just wanted to put into focus here is that these projects proposed in the application have to be 100% free of charge for all participants. And there's 2 types of yeses here, where you could say, yes, all of our programs and projects that we have at our organization is always free, eligible. The other yeses list is that you're saying, yes, this particular project we're going to be talking about is free of charge, but we do have other tuition-based programs in our organization, and that is totally fine. Okay? Again, we cannot seek to fund a one-time performance or religious observations. And if you're requesting, for example, a $6,000 grant, you cannot apply all $6,000 towards purchasing materials. It can only be up to 25% of your ask. Okay? And this is not basically operating as a operating support grant request. Okay? Once you answer those things, you'll submit your form. If you are rendered ineligible by the form, it'll show a message saying, I'm sorry, unfortunately, you're ineligible for this application or this grant. But if you find that you come to that message in error, you can refresh your browser and fill out the eligibility form again and just read through very carefully. And if you're still running into that issue and you know that your organization and project is eligible, feel free to reach out to Alexis and I, and we will help you get situated with that. Once you submit the form, it might scroll you all the way back to the top again, and you'll scroll down and finally see the actual application. And here we are. I'm in an administrative view, so it looks a little bit different, but you're going to start with your organization's information. At this point, you're considered eligible for the most part, so you're just accurately answering this information here. And the difference between school district and public school is, if you're a public school, this project, you're working within this school, this project is happening at this one school, you could just select public school and enter your school name, and then pretty much all other information is from your school district level, like the billing address and so forth. So that's what I wanted to call out. Nonprofits, we are going to ask you a question about how you're related to the proposed project here, whether you're the lead organization or whether you're a fiscal sponsor of an unincorporated group or community-based organization. Both are eligible. We just need to understand your relationship here. And then entering your mission statement and uploading your letter of determination. So that's all I wanted to pull out at the top here. Here's that ADA compliance, more information about what that means, and attestation here. Conflict of interest. If you do have a relationship with someone in ArtsWA, you can name those people here. It doesn't render you ineligible. It just would require us recusing those folks from either being on the panel or, approving panel recommendations for funding. Contact information. This is our outlining of who we typically expect to contact about your status of your application. We'll be sending out notifications, hopefully around early May, and whether or not your application's been accepted or declined. So we do require one email address at the very minimum, but you can list up to 3, and all of those folks will receive that information. Funding priorities. You can select that none of these are applicable to your project. You can select that both are applicable or just one. And again, if you select that you're serving at least 40% of early learners in your participants are from low-income households, you'll choose a file of proof to upload here. Scrolling down, this is information about your project. The title, something simple that just tells us what is going to be happening here, similar to your project snapshot. Really focus on what you will be doing and who will be participating. All of these options of where your project will take place, during school, outside of school, or both, are eligible, and just more information. Now we've come to our first table. There are 3 tables throughout your whole application, and submittable tables are funny. You can press this little arrow here, and it'll expand your view of the table. You, depending on how large the table is, you still will be able to scroll to see the entire piece. You cannot format text in any way in this table. You cannot add or delete any rows, unfortunately. But you can enter information here. This table is talking about where your project is happening, your project locations, and who and what type of populations are participating in your project. You can list up to 8 different projects locations here. If you happen to have more, you can elaborate in the following short answer sections. If you only have 1 location, that's totally fine too. This is, again, just information accurate to your project you're proposing. So entering the location name, city, and county, and then only the applicable attendance numbers you're expecting. So number of educators and or teaching artists associated with the project itself. In my example, I said there's going to be 20 and there's going to be 40 preschool students. But as for the other eligible age groups, we aren't serving those groups in this example project. So that's how you would list those pieces there. Once you type something in here, if you click the X, it will minimize table view and you'll go back to the original application and it will save the information that you've entered. However, do make sure that you are saving your overall application as often as possible while you're filling it out. There is a save draft button all the way at the bottom of the application that I won't scroll to because it's quite dizzying. But do take time to do that as often as possible. Okay. Something to point out here, please make sure that you enter either 6,000 or 10,000 based on your project size and need here. We had to ask it in this way, but it doesn't prevent you from writing like $7,125.20. But please don't write that. That's your grant amount request. And then we come up to our second table in your application. Again, I'm going to click these little arrows to maximize the view of the table. And it is as simplified as possible. So you'll find all the text that you see here is uneditable, and it is predetermined buckets of budget line items that we've made rather broad, because we don't want to see as much detail as your project budget probably has. We just want to see the information specific to how you will use the funds should your application be awarded and approved for funding. The example that we have here is a participating teaching artist at what hourly rate for how many hours and what subtotal, as well as a partner organization at a lump sum of this subtotal of 1,400. And then in this column, you're saying that, yes, we want all that $4,000 to be covered by this grant in this eligible category of project staff, for example. If any of these buckets don't really fit with what you're requesting to fund, then we do have that other option at the bottom. And then one final thing to pull to your attention is that, unfortunately, we cannot prevent you from using the $sign, but it is imperative you do not use the $sign. So when you type in your amount, say it's $2,000, it will calculate the total down here. Awesome. And if I said we're also going to fund professional learning at another $2,000, supposedly this should say 4,000, but it doesn't, unfortunately. So just making sure that you're not using $signs and you're only using numbers, and that your total at the end of your budget is $10,000. Yay. Or if that's what you requested, or $6,000 if that's what you requested. Okay. I'm going to press this X to minimize that table, and I'm going to scroll down to our first criteria question. I'm not going to go through all 4 of the criteria that Alexis outlined earlier, but I will talk about the structure, just looking at this first criteria question that pretty much repeats itself for every subsequent criteria. So the first criteria is arts integrated learning, and what you'll typically come up against is a multiple choice section. Now, it does say in the instructions, choose up to 3 of the following disciplines that is related to your project. Unfortunately, Submittable will not prevent you from choosing more, but panelists will be very keen to see whether or not you've followed those instructions. So please do not select more than what is instructed, and only select what is accurate to your project. So you will not be dinged any points if you only select one, if your whole project focuses solely on dance for the art piece of it. Totally fine. And then the instructions might change. For example, it says select all that applies. So you can do that as well. And there's another multiple choice section. And then we come to our first narrative example. We've made it in this format, kind of pulled out each part of the question into separate bullet points so that nothing is hidden or doesn't get lost in the sauce. And so that you are able to answer every single one of those questions, which is what panelists will be looking for in a successful application. And always after this piece of, or this formatted question here, there is a separate text box, typically titled written answer, and that's where you'll be answering that question from above. That makes sense. And this happens to be limited to 300 words. And last but not least is your project sample. You would choose a file here and upload it. You can only upload one file, whether a document, like a PDF or a Word document, an image, or a video at these parameters. This is where a lot of people get hung up. If your size of your file, especially like videos, is larger than 400 megabytes. So if you're coming up against that issue, please email me, call me, and I can help you with that well in advance of the deadline of the application, which is February 12th. It's a Thursday at 5:00 p.m. So not February 12th at midnight. It is February 12th at the end of our business day, 5:00 p.m. And that is pretty much the things I wanted to show you. I'll go over most common issues, but scrolling back to the top of the application, normally in a non-administrative view, in this top right-hand corner, you would see a link that says add collaborators. And that means you can invite your colleagues, your team members to via email to access this application and also start typing in it as well. That might be helpful for you, or maybe you folks want to work outside of the submittable application um, and then transpose all of your information. But just remember that the original applicant who started this application has to be the person who uploads, I mean, submits the final application before the deadline. And so here's our common issues. Having the application open in multiple views, that sometimes affects your ability to be able to save the most recent work. Not saving often enough and having your work and data lost. So this is our suggestion of using another application, Google Drive, Word documents, to create all of your answers and then transpose it into submittable when you're ready.
Calais,
Uploading. Oh, yes.
one note on the
Mhm,
save button is at the very bottom of the
mhm.
application window. So you have to go all the way down and click Save Draft.
Yeah,
Yeah.
unfortunately. File uploads too large, again, email me well in advance, like before 48 hours of the deadline, so that I can actually get to your pieces and help you. And then again, can't stress enough that we highly suggest not submitting at the very last minute. The very last hour of the day, 4 to 5 p.m. on February 12th, is typically the most when the most applications come through, and that's when there's a lot of traffic. Websites crash, a lot of technical issues happen, and we cannot extend the deadline. So please do plan for time to submit earlier. And then again, make sure whoever started it finishes it. Mhm.
Wonderful. Thanks, Calais, for walking us through submittable and the application. So we're so glad that you tuned in to watch this info session recording. You can see our emails are here on the screen. Mine is alexis.sarah@arts.wa.gov. Calais is calais.matsui@arts.wa.gov. You can find our emails on the Creative Start Project Grant webpage in the guidelines. It's everywhere. And please don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions or wonders. And thanks so much.
Thank you.